Good evening. Calling to order the Tuesday, February 27, 2024 meeting of the Town of South Windsor Planning and Zoning Commission. Let's see, do we have one? Commissioner Dexter is the only one we're missing, right? And to seat, who's ready? I think we're going to seat Mr. I thought Atif was coming. He's not here.
I think there's only one alternate you can seat right now.
Yeah, but Mr. Bernstein is now a regular member. Welcome.
I'd like to thank you, Kathy.
So I guess we'll have Mr. Willett sit for Stephanie Dexter. And I would invite everybody, and myself included, to turn off your cell phone. And we have minutes from, the pledge, yes. Forgot about it. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, gotta learn to read my own agenda. So we have minutes available for February 13. Any comments on those? I have one very minor comment on page 4. The paragraph that starts senior environmental planner, there's a statement that says Wagner noted that, and actually I'd like that to say Wagner wondered whether EV ready and EV capable spaces would count toward the 10%. It really hasn't been established, so that's the only change. Any other changes or comments on the minutes? Do we have them? Well, we'll have them by consensus. They're approved by consensus. All right. And we now move on to the discussion of our plan of conservation and development with folks from SLAM. Please introduce yourself.
Perfect. Evening, everybody. Pat Gallagher with the SLAM Collaborative. This is really our last work session with the Commission before we complete a draft plan to set off the 65-day public comment period. So I have a couple of things we want to go over tonight. First is just a brief recap of the workshop. Can you hear me okay?
Closer, please.
Closer? I'll move it closer to me. How about now? Better?
Better.
Okay, excellent. First, there'll be a brief recap of the workshop, and then the bulk of the meeting is going to be going over what I'm dubbing our coordinated growth management strategies. This was follow-up work after we had our workshop with the WPCA in December. So a couple of new things to share with you all and get your feedback on before we finalize it. And then at the end, we'll go over the tentative adoption calendar. So the project schedule here, we're wrapping up our plan development phase, so really right on track with our proposed timeline, looking at starting the public comment period in March, and I'll talk about that a little more at the end. So the recap of our workshop, in my view, we didn't hear anything that we didn't already hear throughout the process, whether that be the community survey, the first public workshop. We seem to have a lot of the same priorities and a lot of the same concerns. So I'll just kind of give a brief overview for folks who weren't in attendance. So we essentially had people go through the draft planning program, so the same goals, objective, actions that you all went through a few months ago. And we asked that folks prioritize their top 3 under each of the conservation, development, and infrastructure themes with green stickers, and then their 3 lowest priority items with red stickers, just to get a sense for, what are the most important and least important issues. So for the conservation board, we had folks that were, prioritizing open space acquisition, whether that be through the subdivision process or through grants. Several folks responded positively to establishing a PA 490 local program, which we've discussed a bunch over the last few months, and then support for extending trails. We had some red stickers around farmland solar collectors, and we had some discussion around the state siting council process, so kind of clarified what that meant. And then the demolition delay ordinance was seen as a lower priority, and also had some write-in responses. On the development side, again, this kind of echoed what we heard as part of earlier sessions with the public. There was concern about kind of balancing housing growth with your capacity of town facilities, notably the school system. So making sure that that balance continues to be considered as part of future developments. Bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure, we had high priorities for both Sullivan Ave and the town center, and then supporting brownfield redevelopment efforts. Again, a theme we've heard throughout the process. Folks would rather focus on redeveloping obsolete land uses as opposed to greenfield development. So again, consistent. Lower priorities were improving the appearance of the Route 5 corridor, facade landscaping improvement program in the Route 5 corridor, and then several items around housing, which again, I think echoed some of the concerns around the capacity of your facilities to accommodate some of that housing growth. And then finally, infrastructure. We had priorities around incorporating green energy into development projects, efficient water usage, biking and walking options more globally, finding a permanent home for Parks and Rec. And then lower priorities were looking at alternative transportation options, developing a town roadway classification system, and utilizing freight rail. So as we move towards finalizing the draft plan, I think a really important chapter is what we're calling our coordinated growth management strategy, or our coordinated vision. It actually came up as a question at the public workshop. Well, what's the vision of the plan? And we just, rather than kind of boil it down to a sentence or two, we figured this coordinated growth management strategy becomes the vision of the plan. It's a lot of detail behind it, but we tried to capture the essence of what we heard from you all throughout the process and what we heard from the community, and try to better coordinate development policy, infrastructure policy, and conservation policy. So I'd love to hear your feedback once we kind of go through this and see if this aligns with your thinking. So one item that is new that you didn't have in your previous plan is what I'll call a future land use policies plan. And this is essentially your vision for different neighborhoods of town depicted on a map. And it like zoning, it will have different categories of uses and different intensities of uses, but it's not intended to be a zoning regulation. Rather, it's intended to be a tool that you all use as you evaluate applications over the next 10 years. You can consult the map, see what the intent is for that area, see if the development application aligns with the intent of that area, and that can help with your deliberations for special exceptions or zone changes. It's also intended to be generalized. We're not going parcel by parcel. We're trying to have larger contiguous blocks that share common characteristics. And so it'll be important to keep that in context and not interpret it literally, especially on a boundary area. And this is, again, not a zoning regulation, but may inform your future efforts as you're trying to determine conformity with the plan as you get zone change applications or special exception applications. So this map here is a draft future land use policies plan, and really the main differentiators between the areas are uses. So we have residential, commercial, industrial, mixed use areas, and then differing intensities ranging from rural to low, medium, or higher intensity areas like Route 5. And the intensities are what we tried to align with the sewer policies plan, which I'll get to in a little bit.
I don't know whether we should be commenting as you go through each page, but I had a lot of trouble with the colors here, distinguishing between especially the dark reds. And then I guess I'm not convinced we know what we want to put for the parcel on Wheeler Avenue that's vacant right now. I don't know if people, in fact, what is the color there indicating?
So that is the Buckland Gateway. So that basically says the vision for that parcel is consistent with your other uses along Buckland Road in the Evergreen Walk area.
Okay. Now, that's a difference from what we have now, right?
If you're looking at a zoning standpoint, there are different zones, correct?
Yep. Okay.
I think that's a question for the commission is, do they see that parcel as part of the, regardless of zoning, you know, in terms of use and intensity of use, similar to Buckland Road, or is it its own thing? It can certainly be a discussion item for you all tonight. Based on the current zoning, even though it's a different zoning district, it envisions kind of larger format regional retail, which does align with the other uses in the Buckland corridors. That was kind of the rationale behind it.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Any other questions on this before we kind of go through the categories one by one? Okay, so we'll keep rolling.
Yeah, I'm gonna jump in. So on the survey, I know it wasn't a scientific survey, but when I look at things like that, I kind of look at them like what jumps out at me. And the thing that jumped out at me, I was looking for those items that had double-digit stickers, and there were only 2 of them. And not surprisingly, one was the issue about housing not, impacting our facilities like the schools, and that had 10. The other one was farmland solar collectors support policies that benefit town. That was by far and large the largest one in terms of stickers.
Negative stickers.
That was negative. In retrospect, I don't know that I understand why that would have gotten so many negatives. What's your take on that?
So I think for that one, it was a misunderstanding about the role of the town versus the state siting council. So for a commercial solar farm, the town does not have the authority to approve or deny it. That's the authority of the state siting council. So the intent of that was to use a strategy like the town of Simsbury did when they had a commercial solar facility come into a farm. It went through the state siting council approval, and they were able to negotiate as part of the siting council process that once the solar panels reached the end of their useful life, the farmland underneath it would be deeded to the town. I believe it was for $1. So it was, even though the town can't stop a commercial solar facility, to try to get some benefit for the town in the long term as part of the process if you can. And I think people were just confused over, why would we, we want to preserve farmland. Why do we have a thing in here about developing solar collectors on farmland?
So do we need a wording change so it's clearer to people? Because I think that was a fairly heavy representation of the town council people there. And, if they're not understanding the wording, they didn't have a lot of time to understand the wording, but that's what was wrong that they didn't understand what we wrote.
Yeah, I think we can put a sidebar in the draft plan that provides some context around that process. That'll do it justice, hopefully.
I'd appreciate that.
The other aha for me, looking at these maps this way, I really appreciate you guys having done it this way. What struck me just looking at it through fresh eyes, how little open space we have, relatively speaking. And I don't know if the other commissioners feel this way, but I view it as a treasure that we really ought to think hard and fast before we do anything with it other than keep it open space.
Yep, certainly.
That's it.
And we'll definitely touch more on that as part of the open space vision. So each of these future land use policy categories, if it is a residential or a mixed use policy area, we assigned it a residential densities. You had a residential densities plan in your last plan, but it was basically an existing zoning map. So for things like a PDD or a senior housing development, if that were to come in, the former plan's residential densities plan didn't really provide you all with good guidance in terms of, we know where the existing ones are, but where are appropriate locations for future applications should they come in.
I guess that map kind of bothered me that it seems to reflect the gateway zone, but it doesn't really incorporate all of the gateway zone. In fact, on Deming Street, we were in the gateway zone. We did an MAHD, which had mixed support. And so I guess, is that exactly the right area for the, the hashed red there?
So the hashed red is the town center core, most of the Buckland Gateway, and most of the general business zone on Ellington Road.
I mean, I could see where you might consider extending it to the east along Buckland Road up towards the town center,
Yeah.
right? Because it is an area that you could have housing that has business in it. We do have existing housing there, and we have existing business on that side, so you do have a
Right,
mixed
yeah.
opportunity on that.
So Steve, you're talking about the area on the
The other side of Buckland Road.
east side of Buckland, north of Deming Street?
Yeah.
Okay. Yes, Mike?
Yeah, I just have one comment, just to echo Commissioner Bernstein's comment on open space, and I'm looking at that map too, and I'm a huge outdoor person, and I use open space quite a bit, but it's not designated what is really the buffer of open space between neighborhoods and what's actually used for recreation in town. Like I'm looking at Major Donnelly Park, which is right in the middle by the 194 square on there. And, that's used by many residents in town. But when you look on the right, like the Avery neighborhood, I live on Dart Hill Road, and much of that land isn't recreational. They're just buffers between neighborhoods.
Yep.
So I am a proponent for open space. None of that should go away. But I am envious of towns around us like Manchester and Vernon even, because they have giant parcels of land. You take Valley Falls area and you take Case Mountain in Manchester, and you could literally get lost out there. We don't have that in this town. So whatever open space is available in there, I wouldn't want to see it to go away. And my hope is that it's probably a generation or so away, is that you have the Main Street corridor. When some of those landowners sell off their property, I'd rather see that become something recreational as opposed to residential neighborhoods out there. But that's me. But just want to bring that up.
Yep, understood. So getting back to the residential densities plan, is it the consensus of the group to to extend that mixed-use zoning or the mixed-use opportunity designation to the east side of Buckland Road, the areas that Steve's pointing out? We can incorporate that change into the draft, if that's the consensus of the group. I believe it was just the areas that are in the Buckland Gateway Zone, correct, Steve?
Yeah.
Okay.
I still echo your concern from the previous map of the Wheeler Road property. I don't want to, I think if we're going to show something there, we want to be clear about what we're showing. And right here, when you lump it in with Buckland Gateway Zone, you've lumped it into a different kind of residential opportunity category than it currently has.
Yeah,
I don't know if you really
actually-
decided that.
I mean, actually, if you look at the survey, not the thing we did a couple weeks ago, but the survey that was sent out, that area was very low. The support for housing in that location was very low in the general survey, where we had, 1,000 people answer.
Yep.
So I'm not sure I want to show that as a mixed-use opportunity area.
I think it's something different than the Gateway Zone from that perspective.
Yeah, so that could be certainly something unique. We have one of those. Actually, if I go to the last slide, we have the little business park off of Kelly Road right near the Vernon border. That's kind of it's a little area kind of unto itself. So if the preference is to have that parcel as its own, it's quite large, but as its own category, that can certainly be something that we incorporate into the draft.
I think we're looking for commercial or industrial or even warehouse development in that area and not housing.
Okay.
I mean, that's kind of where we lean right now, I think. And it's designated commercial, so I'm not sure it's the same. I mean, Buckland kind of has an implication of mixed use, and it's getting mixed use. I'm not sure we want to move that area. I don't know what other people think, but
Okay.
yeah.
All right, so we can certainly make that change. We also note in the document that accompanied this, which has some greater context and explanation, that you had what were called potential housing opportunity areas from your affordable housing plan, which were more generalized, and they generally, they essentially highlight the same areas as the mixed-use opportunity areas on this map. These are just, I think, a little more specific and tied in. So we referenced that map in the document, but not necessarily add another overlay to this map.
I kind of didn't understand what you were saying, if you'd repeat.
Sure. So I believe we showed it on some of the earlier maps, I believe in the development workshop. When you did your affordable housing plan, you had an overlay map that showed potential housing opportunity areas where, different housing types other than single family would be appropriate. And it was kind of a linear area along Buckland Road. You had a kind of a circular area around the town center, and then a smaller area on the area on Sullivan Avenue, kind of near Ayers Road, near the Geisler's Plaza, which are the same areas here that we're calling our mixed-use opportunity areas, but the geographies don't match exactly, which was kind of our intent because the areas there were much more generalized in our view.
So are you saying that this is consistent with that vision, or it's changing that vision?
It's the same general areas, but I think it's providing some greater specificity. That was very, very generalized.
We also have a type of zone that we can implement called MAHD, which is kind of an overlay zone. I guess is that the right term? But are there areas where we would like to implement that and areas where we don't want to implement that? And is there some way to show that on this?
I think that's exactly the intent of this plan, is that can provide you guidance into which areas would be appropriate for that overlay and which areas would not. I would say, it would likely be the 2 or more units per acre, the kind of the orange color, or the mixed-use opportunity areas are your kind of greatest intensity areas. They have the greatest mix of housing types. So in my view, those two could be at least part of the conversation in terms of where you'd want to land those.
I don't know, anybody else have comments on this page?
Yeah, and I think the important thing is it doesn't mean that every use is appropriate in every site within these areas, right? So within our residential medium density, which is our 2 or more units per acre, it's predominantly single family. We have some condos, we have some age-restricted housing, and if an age-restricted development or another condominium comes in, the intent of the future land use plan isn't to say that every area within that category should have, you should consider a condo or a higher intensity use, but there may be specific parcels on an arterial road or other locational characteristics that may be appropriate. So I think our document will provide a little more context in terms of what should be considered, but I also want to make sure that it's clear with you all that, for something like the Buckland Gateway area, just because a use is appropriate in one part of the Buckland Gateway doesn't necessarily mean that applies everywhere. So to the conversation around the Wheeler Drive property, perhaps we could, if we do want to keep it together in a single area, we could add, we could change this map on the residential densities, but also provide some text that accompanies it that says where mixed-use opportunities should be considered and where they should not. Does that make sense?
Again, I'm having trouble following you because of the acoustics here. So you just that last sentence again.
Sure. So we can, so I think our options for Wheeler Road are we can create a separate category and create its own, we can call it non-residential if that's the intent of the discussion tonight, or we can keep it in the Buckland Gateway, but write some text that says that that site is not envisioned for mixed-use development, but other sites in the Buckland Gateway are. So I think it kind of is the same outcome, but two different approaches.
I guess either one of those would work.
Okay. Any other questions on the residential densities plan? All right, so this just gives kind of brief descriptions of the categories, what intended uses are there, what the residential densities are, and what the sewer policies are, and I'll kind of go over the sewer policies quickly. Our rural areas are the Main Street corridor and some of the neighborhoods in the far northern part of South Windsor, as well as the rural area right in the center of town. So this is largely single-family, large lot development, farmland, and undeveloped lands, so the lowest residential densities. And these areas either don't have sewer today or are in what we're calling our limited sewer area, which we can discuss a little more on the sewer plan. Residential low density is essentially single-family housing, and that's largely what it is today. You may have some institutional uses interspersed, schools, churches, et cetera. Some undeveloped lands, but these areas are largely built out. Slightly higher residential densities, so 1 to 2 units per acre, so half acre to acre zoning, and these are areas that are sewered today. Our medium density residential areas are the areas that have your greatest mix of housing types today, so predominantly single-family residential, but you do have some condominiums, cluster housing developments, age-restricted housing, and institutional uses. So this is an area where we see the potential for some greater units per acre, so 2 or more units per acre, so half acre zoning, and perhaps more intense if it's other housing types. And again, this is sewered. The Buckland Gateway is intended to be, per our discussion in the development workshop, to maintain a business focus. And we tried to capture that in the text and have this be a regional focus. So we don't want to have our major, regional draws located in Sullivan Avenue or Town Center where the traffic and other things are disruptive. So we really want to focus on those bigger commercial uses that aren't appropriate elsewhere. And then limited mixed use and multifamily residential. In the text we had talked about focusing on projects that have already been approved, which is the Phase 2 Tempo apartments, and I believe I think there's another assisted living project as well. Yep. So again, mixed use opportunity area, and this is also sewered. Town Center is envisioned to be a step down in intensity from the Buckland Gateway, and per our discussion at the development workshop, really focusing on the village concept that was established in the last plan. I think everyone agreed that that was the desired path forward. We just need to give it a little more time and see some turnover and redevelopment of those uses. But again, the consensus of the commission at the time was to maintain a retail services business focus, as well as a civic focus with town hall and the library, and then looking at limited residential opportunities in the upper floors of buildings per your overlay zone that exists today. And then the town center periphery aligns with your center north overlay zone. So this is intended to be housing that supports the core essentially. So mixed use development and other housing types that could provide some critical mass to support businesses in the town center. So this we have in the 2 or more units per acre category, and it's also sewered. And feel free to stop, interrupt, ask questions along the way. Our neighborhood node category are our small neighborhood convenience areas located along Oakland Road and Pleasant Valley Road. So these are just small pockets of commercial zoning that have, small scale uses, some, restaurants, gas stations, daycare centers, and the like. So not really intended to be very high intensity, but largely supporting that surrounding, 1 to 2 mile neighborhood.
For that one, are we zoned at all for that?
Yes, you have commercial zones in both of those areas today. It doesn't align exactly with the circle, but it's the general area that the circles show on the map. And so we're calling this non-residential, so reserving it for commercial uses, and it is also in the sewer area. Sullivan Ave, we broke up into 3 separate areas. So we start in the east, where we have more of a retail services and office focus. And like the town center, this is intended to be kind of a step down in density compared to Buckland Road, much more of a local focus. And per, some of the zones that have been passed recently with the overlays there, noting there's limited opportunities for mixed-use residential with a redevelopment focus. So focusing largely on kind of repositioning an obsolete use, potentially taking advantage of some opportunities for housing there. So this is also in the mixed-use opportunity area, like Town Center and Buckland Gateway, and also Seward. What we're calling the transition area is zone commercial today, but this is kind of the eclectic mix of uses between your business area of Sullivan Ave and your industrial area. And so we're calling this its own category called the transition area, where in our goals, objectives, and strategies, we have a recommendation in there to consider adding an overlay here to allow some light industrial uses or other uses that align with its transitional nature. And so this is kind of intended to be really halfway between those commercial and industrial uses. And then the west, we transition to our industrial zones in the Sullivan Avenue corridor. So this is our manufacturing, industrial, office uses with some commercial uses mixed in. And we note that this is intended to be less intense than Route 5. So the more intense industrial manufacturing warehousing uses are envisioned for the Route 5 corridor as opposed to Sullivan Ave West. So Route 5, again, largely aligns with your zoning today for your industrial zone. We're noting that this is continuing to be your primary business or industrial tax generator. It's a regional employment center, drawing in people from around the region, and largely envisioned to be, the mix that it is today with manufacturing, industrial, warehousing, offices, and services.
So going back to Sullivan Avenue West, there is west of Route 5, Sullivan Avenue moves into the Main Street area. I guess, is there a map that shows us that we're not talking about that here?
Yes, so
Okay.
Yep. So the Sullivan Avenue West ends at the rail line, and then we have a little area of Route 5 that goes up the Rye Street corridor, and then anything to the west of Route 5 is rural or low-density residential.
Okay, thank you.
And we had talked about cross-street nodes over the course of the planning process, and these are basically those intersections on, I believe it's Pleasant Valley Road and Governor's Highway, Michelle, where you have some of those supporting commercial uses for the businesses, so your restaurants, gas stations, services that support the employment base. So we're envisioning that these kind of remain those little clusters of business uses as opposed to industrial. Route 5 North aligns with your Route 5 overlay zone. So we're noting kind of this is another transitional area where it's largely single family, but there may be some opportunity for limited commercial uses in line with your current zoning. The business park zone, this was one where Michelle and I had some good conversations on what do we call this zone. Right now it is zoned industrial. It has a housing development that's actually in the industrial zone. That's, I think, a legacy of the 8-30G development that caused it. But it's essentially one single development. It's got a mix of uses in there. I believe it was the Ticketmaster headquarters.
So it's where Gerber used to be, and then Ticketmaster went in there. So it's like 3 or 4 users that are industrial users. It's zoned industrial, but it is kind of like a business park.
So we're intending this to be, light manufacturing, office, kind of a small business incubator space essentially, which I think largely is what it is today, but we don't intend this to be high intensity, heavy traffic generating uses like other parts of your industrial zones.
It's surrounded by residential on 2 of its sides, so.
Say again, please.
It's surrounded by residential on 2 sides. So you have Hillcrest, which is a senior residence, or the senior housing right there, and then you
Right.
also have neighborhoods. So it has definitely been an area that whatever goes on there does affect the neighbors, so it's an active area for us.
And then lastly, we show open space. And again, this is something where there's a lot of different definitions of what open space is, and so we defined it as part of our document here to show kind of what we included and what we didn't include. So this is existing town open space and parks. including subdivision open space, which Mike referenced, kind of the ribbon of open space that you have in the eastern end of town that you've acquired over the years as land was subdivided. We have what we're calling other open space. So this is state open space, land trust properties, subdivision open space that's held by the homeowners association and cemeteries. We did exclude utility rights of way simply because we note them as greenways on our plan, but they have no protections like these other open spaces that we are including in these categories, which have, whether through ownership by an entity that has a conservation mission or through deed restrictions, there's some level of protection. But we do include utility right-of-ways as greenways on our open space vision. So I just wanted to make sure that that was clear.
I guess, I look at utility right-of-way as having, aside from the fact they got power lines and access roads, they have many other properties of open space. Just because we're not building anything there, we're not putting roads in there.
So I think that would fall into the category of what I would call as perceived open space, where essentially it is open space, but it doesn't have formal protections like some of our other open space types. I know, having done this for other towns, one of the more hairy situations is when you list an unprotected piece of open space as open space, and then the property owner says, my property is not open space, so why is it listed as open space on your plan? So that's why we showed it as kind of part of a greenway corridor, but we're not including it in our category. That was at least the rationale behind it. But to your point, Steve, it does serve a function as an undeveloped, as undeveloped land largely. So it has a lot of those same functions as protected open space.
Obviously we're planning Crosstown Trail. We're hoping to build a Crosstown Trail, which will use a lot of the utility right away, and that fits into your greenway. But there are other rights of way that are not really perceived as a greenway right now, that branch off of that power line.
So we could certainly add some text, I think, around this to explain the distinction and also talk about how other areas may contribute to open space without necessarily being in the category. Would that help?
Yeah, I think something like that, yeah.
Okay. So any other questions on the future open space policies plan? Are we all comfortable with this concept in your document with some of those changes we talked about today?
I really like the, breaking it down into a little table with each region and some information about it, getting clear about the sewer. Route 5 North, somewhere in the document, it said it's easy to connect to the East Windsor sewer system, but is that really true?
I wouldn't say easy to connect, but I think it was one of the questions that came up at our last workshop was we discussed that area and the challenges of connecting to the South Windsor system because there's very few properties and they'd have to build a pump station to get the connection in. But I did look at the East Windsor map and there is sewer all the way down to just about the town line. So working with Michelle, we had decided to move that into the sewer category to at least keep the options open should they want to look into that. And obviously that would happen.
You answered my question that you actually checked the East Windsor sewer map.
Yep.
Great, thank you.
All right, so this gets into our sewer policies plan. And again, our goal was to align, the future land use plan becomes the building blocks to everything else. So the future land use plan, each category has a residential density. Each category has a sewer policy that aligns with it. And that aligns with the conversation that we had with the WPCA. And we do know that this is going to be kind of an ongoing conversation with them over the coming months. So these are the same three areas that we discussed with the workshop with them, where we have our primary sewer service area, so taking a much more generalized approach than the parcel-based approach that we have today. And this largely, I think the intent of this was we'll cover, all existing areas that have sewer, making sure that, whoever has connections today can connect in the future, and also making sure our higher intensity policy areas are also sewered. So as new development comes online, they have the ability to connect. The limited sewer service areas where I think we had the bulk of our conversation last time, and I think it reflects the geography of your community. Your water pollution control facility is right off the Main Street corridor, so one of your rural areas. And what happens is, all of our trunk sewers that connect our higher density areas to the water pollution control facilities go through rural areas. And so that kind of was the impetus of our conversation of, well, can any new development along those trunk sewers connect, or do we want to have a more limited policy and allow parcels with frontage to connect, but not give that same ability for interior lot developments like subdivisions. And we had talked about an offset policy, which we generally followed, but we do have some variation in the areas, which I can describe on the map, because we wanted to make sure that we were capturing all existing structures with frontage, so it varies depending on kind of where structures are located on the map.
Can I pick at a word there? On the primary area, you say low and moderate density, but I think we mean high and moderate density.
So this aligns with the categories on the future land use plan. So we have residential low density and residential medium density are our sewered policy areas. So maybe I'll just I can align the text and capitalize it.
Where do high density areas go?
So we don't have a residential high density category on your future land use map.
Okay.
We do have the mixed use opportunity areas, which are the commercial and industrial areas. So I can add that to the list as well.
So this is basically saying if it isn't rural residential and it's on one of the residential categories, it's going to be in the primary area.
Sorry, can you say that again?
If it's not in the rural residential, but it's another residential zone, it's going to be in the primary.
Correct.
Okay.
I think, though, to add the mixed-use opportunities to the primary service area makes sense.
Yep, yeah, I'll definitely make that addition. And so essentially our residential rural category is either limited sewer service or conservation area, depending on whether or not it has sewer today.
I've been confused by the word conservation. I mean,
Yeah, that's the term you've traditionally used on your map, and so we just rolled with your naming system. We've heard it called sewer avoidance or septic management areas or kind of other terms that can be used.
yeah, I think the state law uses the term sewer avoidance, right? I don't know if I think that's the real meaning of it, right? So maybe if we switch that.
So we can make that change as well, and again, this isn't the WPCA's land, so they can choose to use whatever language they so choose, should they adopt this approach going forward. One item that we had discussed a little bit that working with Michelle, we had put in here for consideration is a potential exception for open space subdivisions in your limited sewer service areas where your open space subdivision gives you a greater percentage of land as open space in exchange for smaller lots, which may have more difficulty accommodating on-site septic. So it could be a potential win-win for areas that are developed. You can at least get a greater share of open space out of it in exchange, providing the sewer service that allows you to have a greater share of open space.
But aren't we requiring open space now, pretty much?
This is a greater, so through the conventional subdivision process, you have a certain set aside, and then the open space subdivision, it's a greater percentage, and Michelle can probably speak to that.
So you do have a lot of target properties that if they were to come in collectively for an open, for a subdivision, but you could have them come in individually and they wouldn't make sense to be an open space subdivision and still, so I think it would be an incentive to have people maybe do open space subdivisions where they weren't required to do it. The other thought might be is if you ever had any situation where you wanted some kind of senior residence development or some kind of density, you would probably want that to be a sewered project, and maybe you'd get more open space as a result of it. So I think you might want to consider some exceptions in your sewer avoidance area for projects that might gain some of your bigger goals of more open space or more land that's not developed.
Yeah, I guess I'm troubled by that because, I mean, the kind of places where we're going to be building subdivisions are, out Barber Hill Road or something like that. And you're really talking about extending the sewer lines into areas where we don't have them. if you follow that policy.
Yeah, and I think, again, it would maybe be something where it doesn't mean everything would qualify, but it could be based on, to Michelle's point, an evaluation of kind of the bigger picture. You know, if
Yes,
you're doing a half-mile sewer extension, it probably doesn't align with the goal and intent of what we're trying to do.
Yeah, I saw it more frontage lots where you already had sewer. I didn't see it going down Main Street, for example. I thought if you already had sewer in front of your house lot on Main Street and you wanted to go further in and do an open space subdivision, I wasn't thinking of it being extended further down Main Street, you know, more trunk lines or things like that. That wasn't thinking. Ultimately, it's going to be the WPCA's, how they want to extend sewers.
Although
decision.
PZC does have, you know, the 8-24, review process as part of sewer extension, so I think this will inform your, your policy around sewer extensions, even if they don't adopt necessarily this exact approach.
I don't know, other people got any comments here? I'm doing all the talking. Okay, or you're doing all the talking and I'm doing a little.
Give me a break.
Okay,
so
thanks,
let's go.
Pat. I mean, I gotta say, I really like this sewer plan that we've got. And the policies, these three categories, I think it really nails what we need, so I hope the WPCA will go along with that.
All right, so this just shows the map, and again, this aligns with our conversation that we had at the workshop with WPCA, with the only change being that area of Route 5 north of the Scantic River, which is now in our primary sewer service area, really along that frontage. But areas in green are our conservation or avoidance areas, our limited sewer areas along Main Street, some of the interior roads in the center of town, and then Pleasant Valley Road on the west side of Route 5.
So why is it Strong Road? Strong Road has a sewer going down it according to that map?
Strong Road has a sewer going down to it. Yes, I believe the residential part, the residential subdivisions off of Strong Road are sewered, and then kind of just below the label that says Strong Road on either side of that, I believe, is the industrial zone, so that's why that area was included.
I'm just wondering why, if you go along Strong Road or you get to, is that Pierce or West? There's no, there's no limited sewer service drawing there. Am I missing something?
So for the area on the east of Route 5, we captured the industrial zone on Strong Road, and then as soon as it turned to the rural residential areas, that's when we started the conservation or a sewer avoidance policy area.
There currently isn't a sewer line in that area.
Okay, I thought we were seeing,
No, it stopped at the industrial, I remember the Suburban Printers was the name of the company it stopped at coming from Route 5, so. A stretch that's septic.
I mean, it looks like they've drawn, I mean, the lines on there are sewer lines, right?
The green lines are existing sewer mains.
Those are
yes.
black lines? Okay.
And then the gray are just the roads.
Okay,
underneath
thank
it.
you.
So another area that we had kind of tabled as part of our infrastructure discussion was a sidewalk priorities plan. We had an initial map that showed specific sidewalk segments, and I think the consensus of the commission was we want to create a more generalized map showing areas rather than specific roads. And so we put together a draft sidewalk priorities plan, and I'll just kind of explain our rationale behind it. So we took our commercial future land use policy areas and our medium density residential policy areas, our school walk sheds. So we looked at the district's transportation policy of when they don't provide busing to students, it's a third a mile for elementary schools, half mile for middle, and a mile for high school. We drew those buffers around those buildings, respective buffers. We did another buffer around town hall and the library, another half-mile buffer around town parks and higher density areas, so Nevers Park and Veterans Memorial Park, where you have you do have a community around there that could walk. arterial roadways. So this, I think, came up throughout the conversation, is having safety on your higher speed roadways. So we included Buckland Road, Sullivan Avenue, and others, but excluding Route 5. And then we had a couple of islands where they fit some of these other categories, but we wanted to make sure that they were connected in. So we had a couple of other connections we put in along Avery Street, Foster Street, and then also a couple of connections to the Bissell Bridge multi-use trail. So we're showing two, and this is probably an either or on either Pleasant Valley Road or Chapel. And then we also took the crosstown trail route and established a buffer on that as well. And so this shows our generalized areas, and in blue are your existing sidewalks. So we have some areas outside of our priority area that are sidewalked, which is good, but we're hoping this can be a good guide, looking to spend town capital dollars, what areas are appropriate or the highest priority.
So Michelle, is the crosstown trail in the south end there, is that actually consistent with the plans that they've been putting out? The way it curves down there and...
I'd have to verify that. We can take a look at that, but I
Check
think it
that.
might be, yeah.
The line where you say connection between existing sidewalk areas, Avery Street, Foster Street, and it says Main Street between Pleasant Valley Road and Abyssal Bridge. What existing walkways are we?
So you have the multi-use trail going across the Bissell Bridge that'll eventually connect to the Windsor River Walk, which will eventually go all the way down to Hartford. But right now, you can't walk there from anywhere else in South Windsor except driving your car and parking at the terminus of the trail on Main Street. So we have kind of some way of getting there without using your car.
But where would that lead you to?
The Bissell Bridge?
No, from the Bissell Bridge up to Main Street, and there's still no sidewalks.
Yeah, so we have the areas highlighted in red is essentially a small area of Main Street south of Pleasant Valley Road, and then you can make the connection into the larger sidewalk system either at Chapel or Pleasant Valley Road. So that would include building a sidewalk along a small section of Main Street to make that connection.
Well, Chapel Road is the greenway, so
I know the town engineering is looking at Chapel Road, and they're looking at a multi-use path potentially on Chapel Road between Route 5 and Main Street with the rebuild. So that is a potential, something they're discussing. But I agree, either Chapel or Pleasant Valley, I mean, we target one of them for bikers or whatever to get over it. Chapel seems to be where, it's a bike route currently on all the state's plans and whatever, that makes probably most sense to try to.
well, right now Chapel Road is the bike route. It's actually considered a greenway, even though it isn't very green.
So, I mean, we can certainly keep just the Chapel connection to provide greater clarity there.
I don't know about Pleasant Valley. I don't know what people think about that.
Certainly a further distance, so. Thoughts? Well, I think it's probably a change that's worth making because it provides greater guidance, right? If you have two potential ways of getting there, it can ultimately lead to some other conversations. So I think Chapel, given its the bike lane on part of it now, the shorter distance, I think makes more sense out of the two.
I mean, I don't know, the residents in that area asking for sidewalks, I mean, if you start,
Yeah, I mean, it's a rural area, so it doesn't really lend itself, other than just being along the route to something else.
I mean, the people who live nearer to the pool definitely wanted the sidewalks connecting to the pool area, and that's fine. But I think going past Route 5,
I will tell you, the answer to that is no.
okay, well, then I think we're
Nobody
kind of
wants them,
settling
and
on
nobody's
that one.
asking for them, so you'd have a fight on your hands.
You're our Main Street expert, so yeah, you
I
know the
would
folks
take
down there, so what are your thoughts on the Chapel Road?
Keep the Chapel
Showing on
Road
Chapel Road then?
to Bissell Bridge. I mean, the Bissell Bridge is a really nice bike route, okay.
But it already has its walkway.
Yeah.
Now, once you get onto Main Street, the street itself is
Yep.
your pathway. Like I said, you think you're gonna have quite a fight.
I mean, Main Street is actually a terrific biking street, and I don't think we need a multi-use trail along Main Street because it's just
No.
very pleasant for biking, and yeah, there are
Low
cars
traffic.
and,
Yep.
but the Chapel Road thing, I think, definitely needs some improvement.
Okay. All right, and last is the open space vision, and Glenn had a nice presentation on the conservation workshop where we talked about the many entities that have a role in the town's open space network. And so our intent here was to try to take the priorities of all of these different groups and do an overlay analysis to try to get a coordinated vision. And knowing that we have folks that are trying to acquire open space through the Open Space Task Force, we know we're trying to develop a multi-use trail. We know we're trying to acquire land as part of the subdivision process, and so how do these all kind of tie into a grand strategy? So this map here just shows our open space vision, and apologies for the many colors. We kind of struggled with the best way to visualize it given the amount of information. So in our greens, and we have a dark green, which is town open space, and a lighter green, which is our state private land trust open space. These are existing open space properties. In pink, we have our target properties from the open space plan, which was updated a few months ago. We're also showing community facilities because these may be good connections between existing and future open space areas, while also providing some active recreation opportunities through fields. We have PA 490 land in yellow, and this is largely in the Main Street corridor, farmland in the Main Street corridor, and this offers some temporary disincentives to develop through lower tax assessments, but could be properties that are targeted for purchase of development right programs in the future. We have what we're calling priority conservation areas, which are light green with kind of an orange buffer around them. These are our residential rural density areas from our future land use plan. So that's the Main Street corridor, the two neighborhoods in the far north along the East Windsor border, and that area in the center of town that has a lot of natural resource constraints. It was interesting doing the overlay and seeing just how many of your target properties and PA 490 lands were in your residential rural density policy area. And again, I think it speaks to the desire to try to discourage development in those areas to the greatest extent possible and try to steer them to other areas of town where we have infrastructure to support them. And then we're showing the Crosstown Trail as kind of our priority greenway corridor. And Steve will check on the routing and make sure we have the latest and greatest. And then we're showing other greenway corridors. We had discussed a riverfront greenway as part of the development workshop. We'll note that besides the boat launch, that's the only property with a permanent protection along the Connecticut River. And so in our eyes, this is a much more aspirational, maybe a 50-year vision, as opposed to something that you're likely gonna make a lot of progress on in the next 10 years given your other priorities. But we've included it here just to get the wheels in motion should an opportunity arise along the path in the future. And then we have two connector greenways, east-west greenways, that are connecting the Crosstown Trail to the riverfront. One that follows right-of-way along 291. I believe there's some Eversource right-of-way there as well, eventually providing the connection to the Bissell Bridge and the regional greenway system in Windsor. Another connection to the Manchester Trail System, which again will provide a connection to the regional trail system. And then a second east-west connection in the northern end of town that goes through several town open space properties and future target properties, which could provide another opportunity to link the riverfront area and the Crosstown Trail. And then finally, our blueways, which are water trails essentially. The federal government has a federal blueway program, and that can provide some funding for recreational resources along the river, and the Connecticut River is designated as a national blueway. We're also identifying the Scantic River as a blueway, knowing you recently acquired open space there and plan to build a boat launch. So that waterway can serve as really a recreation asset to the town as well.
So if you come off the Bissell Bridge, right now, people hit Main Street and then they go up to Chapel Road. This diagram shows a route that goes closer to the interchange and cuts across. And I'm not actually familiar, maybe Michelle, you know, what land are we going through there that we could build a trail on?
I think a lot of it is in the I-291 right-of-way. So similar to what they did along 384 in Manchester, where you have kind of the multi-use trail within the right-of-way. And that could potentially be an alternative to, you know, on-road sidewalks connecting into the Bissell Bridge.
That would bring you up, what Steve is talking about, going up King Street. Is that correct?
Yeah, and I think the challenge with that is going to be how do we cross Route 5?
I mean, Chapel Road as a traffic light, as awkward as it is to use it. But, okay.
Now, the crosstown trail that you have along in the meadows, along the Connecticut River, along the Blue Ways Trail. So the Blue Ways,
That's the river, right?
I understand. What I'm saying is the Blue Ways, the navigational, the high tide, how is that determined? The land, the tillable land, or the high land, is owned by the landowners. The highest, I don't know, explain to me the Blue Ways, besides the Connecticut River. It's
Yeah.
title.
So I think it would be the navigable part of the waterway where you could use your kayak or canoe, or if it's the Connecticut River, a fishing boat.
But then you have this connecting trailway, which is owned by all private landowners, which I discussed with you at the prior meeting.
Yep.
It's never gonna happen.
That's why we noted it as, it's probably not gonna happen in the next 10 years, but should land become available 10 years from now, is it at least identified in your plan as an area? So that, I think that was our rationale, is we didn't wanna close the door should an opportunity arise, but we do understand that it is all privately owned, and out of all the land in town, you know, it's floodplain, it's not likely to be developed. There's probably better priorities, but certainly it could be an opportunity in the future should there be a willing landowner to sell.
Kevin, why won't it happen?
What's that?
Why won't it happen?
Well, first of all, none of the farmers want that pathway down there. There's enough vandalism that goes on now. So the minute you create a navigable pathway, the dirt bikes, the quads, that is already a nuisance, it'll just become even more random. And now you'll have barbed wire and fencing all over the meadows, and it's, trust me when I tell you, it will never happen.
I've been down there.
Yeah, and it won't happen.
A lot of target practice down there.
Huh?
A lot of target practice down there.
Okay.
But that's important context to know. We don't want to stir the pot here. So I said that's important context to know about the landowners there. So I think in the chapter text that accompanied it, we explained it, but I can add more to that just to hopefully give them some assurances that, you know, it's not imminent. And I think too, we can note that a greenway doesn't necessarily mean a multi-use trail, right? A greenway can just be a passive corridor of protected land, right? So crosstown trail, certainly it's a greenway, but it's also a multi-use path. You can have greenways that don't have multi-use paths.
If you look at East Windsor's got a greenway along the river, it's fairly nicely developed, even though it floods occasionally. It's not just a path through the woods. I don't know who owns it, actually.
That's town.
Yeah, so I think
I think once-
it'd be nice to replicate that.
I think step one is acquire land. Step two is if you acquire enough land, then maybe talk about a trail. But I think to Kevin's point, if we kind of talk about it in more of a land acquisition standpoint rather than a multi-use trail standpoint, I think is that a fair compromise of?
Yeah, I mean, you'd have to acquire it. I think you'd have to have a meeting set up with all the individual landowners. So
Yep.
they get a room.
We also did note that Goodwin University actually owns a lot of the riverfront properties south of the bridge, and they've been active in trail development in Glastonbury and East Hartford as well, so that they could potentially be spearheading an effort as well. I don't know what their plans are, but they've certainly been active in that front.
I mean, that's a beautiful section. It'd be nice if we could replicate that, but, you know, obviously we gotta deal with the land and maybe find some kind of buffer to protect the farmers.
Yep, certainly. And this just describes the categories. Any questions on any of these? Folks generally like the approach with some of those changes we've discussed tonight? And so this will really be, I think, a key chapter in the plan. So over the coming couple of weeks, we'll be developing the final draft of the plan that'll be for that public review process. So we had some good feedback as part of our planning program workshop where we did the color coding, green, yellow, red for the goals, objectives, and actions. And then we had some new suggested actions to be added that we have too that we'll incorporate into the draft. Certainly we have some edits to make tonight. But our outline here is really to set the stage with an introduction, kind of the boring stuff. What is a POCD? Overview of the process. Chapter 2 would be what are some of the key trends in South Windsor today? So we'll summarize, our demographics, housing, economic development, natural resources, et cetera. Chapter 3, we're envisioning to be what we went over tonight. So our vision for the future. So all those various maps, and I think that'll be a good framework before you start looking at goals, objectives, and strategies as you have a sense of where those specific things align to on the map. And then we get into our topical chapters, which will have the planning program elements that we had discussed at our workshop back in December. So it's centered around conservation, development, and infrastructure with a brief chapter about sustainability just to introduce the concept. And then the last chapter would be the implementation plan, which you have in your current plan, which takes the planning program a step further and says who's responsible, is this a short, medium, long-term priority, and just is a better way of tracking your progress. So any other kind of closing thoughts, comments that you'd like to share with me before we wrap up our draft?
So why don't we actually go around the table here and just give everybody a chance. Commissioner Willett.
Yeah, my only question or comment was on the sidewalk plan. Those are it's just one large list of priorities. Do we actually prioritize that at some point to figure out what we're going to attack first, or do we not bother at this stage?
I think part of it's probably the strategic element of what funding's out there. Certainly you have your town capital plan, and we'd probably look to the town council to establish their priorities out of that. But we have all sorts of other funding programs that may be available for certain items. So for example, Safe Routes to School, you can't spend that in the town center, but you can spend it around, Eli Terry School to build more sidewalks.
So the thought occurred to me along the lines of what you're saying. The schools, I think, are the first priority. And maybe on that chart, you could color in those half-mile radii or whatever they are, a little different color. So we could see that those are the priorities to get the school access handled. That's like number one. And it's actually the way I think the town is operating right now.
Yeah, and I think there's a financial rationale to that too, right? Of if you build sidewalks, then it reduces your busing costs for school, and obviously there's benefits to walking as well. So it could be kind of a double benefit there.
Yeah, but my only request, and I think I've mentioned it before, is we have a lot of gaps in sidewalks. Like if I just think about Nevers, you can't get from one end to the other. You just can't get without having to walk on the street, and it's very busy. So I'd like to see a way to prioritize that. Unlike Nevers, as an example, there's a patchwork of sidewalks where there are gaps that may be, hundreds of feet long where you have to walk in a bike lane that's that wide with cars buzzing by at 40 miles an hour. Like, I'd just love to see us prioritize the incomplete thought of what we did with some sidewalk sections as priority number one, and then I don't know, I think maybe getting a sidewalk that goes across 5 and down Chapel, that's at the end. Like if somehow we won the government lottery and we had unlimited funds, maybe, but that's probably the last thing on the list, rather than just a list of here's what we want to accomplish. So,
And if I just to make a comment along those lines, one of the things I think that staff like about this kind of concept is rather, in previous plans, we'd have low, medium, high priority. And they really didn't make a lot of sense over time. Whereas this, when they're applying for grants or applying for funds for road projects, it shows up around our schools. And the gaps that you're talking about, we can pick up, we can do a sidewalk project of just gaps, which is what, they're starting to target. And this kind of mapping kind of takes out whether it's a high or a low priority. It's a priority because it's within a half mile of the school. So I know that the engineering department has already taken the draft map and has used it in submission of some grant applications they have going forward right now. So I think by describing our priorities more than saying it's this road and not this road, we have a little bit more flexibility, especially with developers too. We can now say just because it doesn't show up on the map, on Ellington Road, we missed out on sidewalks because they said your map didn't show it. Now we've kind of just said, hey, we want them in our commercial areas, and it gives you folks, I think, a little bit more flexibility to when we say, what does our plan say? So, but I agree, there's a lot of gaps that we've tried to target and we continue as funding becomes available. There's a lot of years, a lot of decades where I can tell you that we didn't build sidewalks. We as a town didn't. We let developers build them, but we didn't go out there and do it. Today, the mindset's clearly different, and we're doing more sidewalks over the last years. And you can even see it when you look at your last plan versus this plan. It shows you how many miles of sidewalks we've done since then. It really is, it's been quite a bit.
great, thank you.
But great.
Thank you, I have no comment right now.
Paul?
So thinking ahead as we're getting near the public hearing, I'm guessing the public will be able to access something on the website to review in advance of the public hearing. What format will that be? Will that be like one of these decks or?
So it'll be it'll be more like your 2014 plan. It'll be the report, it'll be a lot of text.
Sorry, say it again.
Sorry, it'll look a lot like your 2014 plan, where it'll
Okay.
be more of a report. It'll have graphics and maps and stuff, but it'll be it'll be much more narrative than the decks, which are bullets. And so per the state statutes, you have to post it on the website. You also have to file hard copies with the town clerk. So there'll be hard copies there as well.
And that would be something we would be getting well in advance, hopefully?
Yeah, so I can jump ahead.
So that's going to be the thing that when the public comes in and they have comments, they're going to be referring to.
Yep, so we have a kind of a target date of completing the draft plan by mid-March. And then starting that referral, the referral is basically what kicks off the 65-day public review process. That would, right now I have penciled in your second March meeting for ECC.
So I think what Paul is asking is when are we going to have a draft mailed to the commission members as opposed to when it goes out to the public?
So right now we have March 15th as the date we're targeting.
Okay, thank you.
My only other thing, we're not going to get into this tonight.
No, but I think tonight's the good time to hear from it, so.
Well, in the interest of time, I don't know that we,
We have a public hearing coming up at 8:30.
Yeah, so is it more just kind of the concept of the vision statement, or?
yeah, I wanted to make a comment, and without opening Pandora's box, I think what you have here is very good. If I think about my marketing career, one of the things that we always tried to do when we wrote vision or mission statements is to craft them so that they spoke uniquely to the product, the town, whatever it might be. And as I read this, I can replace South Windsor with probably 50 other towns in Connecticut, and this would make sense. So the whole point being, and this may be just a me thing, the other commissioners can chime in. When we talk about our mission or our vision, I would like to see something that maybe speaks more uniquely to South Windsor. And that opens the box, well, what does make South Windsor unique? Interestingly, we had a sign subcommittee meeting last night. We kind of touched on this a little bit, just the three of us. That's probably brainstorming that we have to do offline. I have my thoughts, but I think that's something that maybe we should all get together and kind of hash out a little bit.
Yeah, certainly something we can look into. I think the challenge is how do you condense it into something so small? That's why we essentially gave you the whole chapter. It almost becomes the vision as a 15-page document as opposed to one paragraph to be able to do it justice, to your point.
Okay, that's it. Thank you.
Kevin?
I want a couple of things, touch on the sidewalk. Maybe I'm prejudiced because I live on Main Street, but I know you're gonna catch nothing but opposition for any sidewalks on Main Street. Even Chapel, if you do improvements on Chapel Road, which I believe their engineers are working on, wouldn't, right now, like, for example, you bike, there's no issues with Main Street and bikers, okay? There's no issue with the road race, there's no issues. Sidewalks are not necessary. If people want to come across the Bissell Bridge and get on Main Street, it's beautiful. It's a National Historic Scenic Road. I would eliminate that because that's not a priority. I don't know who prioritized it, but it was definitely not Main Streeters or people on Chapel. Going back to that greenways along the river, I would, if you want to keep it in there, that's fine, but again, when and if that time comes, if you have MDC right-of-ways, you have Eversource right-of-ways, I believe that they allow, and they're participating in that pathway, correct?
Well, yeah, I mean, we have to get into contracts with them and so on, but yes.
Right, so,
And they've actually sat down, walked with us, hiked with us.
so you're dealing with a municipality, but when you're dealing with the individual landowners, I'm just telling you, you might as well take that off also, besides the sidewalks on Main Street, so. All right, thank you.
My biggest concerns were dealing with the sidewalks. I think most of the comments have been there because I really do believe prioritizing certain areas would make a lot of sense. I mean, something as simple as Ayers Road to get to the high school. You know, you've got all these other sidewalks crossing over and then they go to nowhere land. So, I also agree with Commissioner Foley that Main Street, if you're ever going to build a sidewalk there, that should be way down the list of concerns. I think that there's so many other areas that need to be upgraded, that need to be connected. You've got a beautiful sidewalk that runs up Beelzebub, and if you're walking to the fire department, great, but if you're not going there, it doesn't go anywhere. So, I mean, there's ways to connect it down to the Orchard Hill School and other places. So other than the prioritizing certain areas, I think the rest of it, you know, makes a lot of sense, but I think that's my biggest concern. Sure. Otherwise, very good.
Yeah, and I guess I'll echo that as well. I guess the prioritization list of sidewalks, Main Street would be at the bottom. I wouldn't want to put it on the list, then all of a sudden there are other areas that need sidewalks more, that are neglected. Again, just echoing what has been said before, that's really my only concern.
Okay.
Or even just one color for schools.
And so, once we kick off the 65-day public comment period, essentially, it's pencils down while the comment period is open, so there'll be no active editing of the draft, but we'll obviously be collecting comments from the public. It'll be referred to Town Council and the Council of Governments per state statute.
I'm sorry, Pat, but I actually had one more.
Oh, I'm sorry, Steve, we missed you.
Didn't call on myself yet. I think, I mean, we just recently had the superintendent of schools in here telling us how close we are to running out of space in the schools. And yet, throughout this plan, we're talking about housing, and I don't know how to balance that. I mean, I know that's probably the right thing to talk about in a plan of conservation development, but are we overemphasizing housing in this?
So there's a paragraph in the vision chapter that we shared with you. It talked about the housing opportunity areas from your affordable housing plan, and we included some text in there to kind of address, you know, the elephant in the room, I guess, for lack of a better term, of we think there may be opportunities to meet housing needs in a way that minimizes impacts to schools. So we've talked about age-restricted housing, right? That's one way of meeting your housing needs, limiting impacts on schools. And then we also noted small apartments, studio and one-bedroom apartments. Those tend to have very limited impacts to schools compared to a two-bedroom unit. As part of a plan, you have to plan for housing. But I think we tried to balance that with recognizing that there are real challenges in South Windsor, and at least in the near term, until some of those enrollment pressures are addressed, that you may be limited to talking about certain housing types as part of a zone change process, rather than a more broad, come in and tell us what you want to build.
Okay, well, I think that was my only comment, other than everything else we talked about. So you may continue with what you were saying.
Sorry
If I can add.
I rudely interrupted you.
Steve, if I can add one comment, I just want to make my opinion. I'd love to get everybody else's feedback. It's not just about schools. We are at the precipice where we're going to need at least one shift for fire, maybe full-time 2-shift at a minimum, but one at a minimum, 2 likely. We may have to go full-time 3-shift. Additional housing will result in an increase for public safety, so that's going to be additional police, social service. We really have maxed out our ability to service the needs of the existing population we have today. And if we have a continuation of turnover in housing where we have aging population that's moving out with more younger people, they are gonna put greater demands on the overall government in South Windsor, and that needs to be considered. It's not just the school system, which is already maxed out.
I mean, to further your point, even doing senior housing, our senior center is now basically on a wait list, everything you want to do. It's totally booked up. So part of the plan, if we're really going to increase senior housing in town, we better have in there a plan for increasing the resources that we need to serve that population, because right now, the quality of what we're able to give people is going to go down just because they can't get in. So.
Certainly.
It's about quality, not quantity. And that's the problem.
So I don't know if there's something we can.
Yeah, I think it's
do
a
with the
broader
plan.
conversation about community facilities. We can extend it to, certainly schools are important, but we can also note there's other facilities that.
I mean, do we need to expand the community center? Are these the kind of things?
I think we have that actually in the, that was in the draft planning program, is looking at a way of expanding that or planning improvements there.
Okay.
So any other questions on the tentative timeline here? So the referral's pretty boilerplate. So typically that can just be done as an agenda item on a regular meeting as opposed to a special meeting. And that essentially just kicks off the statutory process. You'll have to send copies to the town clerk by a certain date, post on the website by a certain date, and hold a public hearing after the 65 days, but it's more of a formality than, it won't be a public hearing, for example.
So, but I mean, are we as a commission going to sit down and go over the plan, the document, or are we just going to send it out for 65 days?
So I guess that's a question for you all. If you'd rather have a meeting devoted to discussing the full draft rather than we've done it piecemeal with the components, and we either have to kind of adjust the timeline back, or we have a special meeting and try to discuss it before the 26th.
I guess I'd ask the others what they think.
Yeah, I just had one comment. I was just hearing everybody's comments here, and certainly sidewalks are an issue, but I think Commissioner Viteri mentioned connecting different sidewalks, and I live in the northeast part of town, and the town has done a great job with Avery Street. Most of it was sidewalk from Manchester all the way up to Dart Hill Road. But the 2 sections of the street that haven't been done yet are the most narrow and dangerous and steepest parts of the road. And it's probably a cost factor, so they can't get kicked down the road, but when we do these things, we should be complete end to end and not wait a generation between them, because it's been several years now between doing most of the road and leaving parts of it out. I'm an avid runner, and it doesn't make sense for me.
Yep.
So it's kind of like one of those things that makes me nuts, because I drive it every day.
Yep.
And I saw in the northeast part of town on Route 74, there's a sidewalk extension that goes to the Ellington town line. I'm not sure why that's on there. There's not much up there, and I can't see Ellington bringing sidewalks up to South Windsor.
Yep.
So to me, that would be kind of a wasted half mile of sidewalk that could probably better utilize somewhere else, but just want to comment on that, but thank you. But it's a great job.
So do we want a meeting to go over the whole draft, or do we want to just go over it during the 65-day period?
Yeah, so I think to clarify that, Steve, that's definitely an option, is I think we want to make sure that there's nothing that's gonna, that you're all not comfortable with as a commission, knowing that there may need to be some discussion on certain items that you all can address as part of your public comment period as well. So that's certainly an option as well, but I'll defer to you all to see what your approach is.
So what's the question on the table?
Okay.
Have a special meeting to review the final draft is what you're,
Right,
before it goes out to public.
right.
So in my, I guess, almost 5 years on this commission, we've never had a meeting, the entire commission, to brainstorm things like this. Not applications, we know we can't talk about applications, but things like this. I would welcome that. I think that would be a great precedent for us, considering the role that we play in this town, and getting us together so that we can just discuss amongst ourselves things of this nature, I think would be critical and a great idea. I'm all for it.
And the only thing I ask is if we do schedule something like that, can we do it downstairs, because the acoustics in here is terrible, like the worst.
Second that, yeah.
So Pat, what if we were to try to do a special meeting the first in April?
Yeah, so that's another option is we can kind of slide the timeline back a little bit. And then, yeah, I can work with Michelle to find some dates that would work.
Or not, yeah. I
So
mean,
you'll
the
have to
idea would
look
be
at-
everybody goes home, they read the thing, they mark up their comments, put little tabs on it.
Do you
so we
know
come
the
in.
expiration date?
The new guy will bring pizza.
You're good. So your current plan expires in September. So if we need to push it back a couple of weeks to get that extra meeting
We
in,
actually, though, we want to get it done by July 1st. We really do. So I don't really want to extend it beyond that.
Yeah,
Yeah, we want to keep it in the fiscal year.
Yep.
But if we could plan a special meeting being the first Tuesday of April.
What's the date?
Give me one second.
Plus, yeah, what our schedule looks like.
It'd be right after Easter, I believe. It'd be the Tuesday after Easter.
Because I'm leaving on the 3rd, I think.
How come I can't find my calendar?
The 2nd is the first Tuesday.
Yeah,
So we could do
April
this.
2nd. And that would be that we distribute to the commission, like on the 15th, a document that you guys could spend 2 weeks really digging into, and then at that April meeting, kind of make any things, and then at our next regular meeting, maybe be where we refer it for the 65 days,
Yep.
to try to keep
makes
it
sense.
somewhat on our schedule.
Yeah, I can do the 2nd.
I'm available that day too.
Okay, so we'll make that a tentative plan special meeting downstairs on the 2nd. You guys are going to have some homework to do. You're going to have to read through the plan. But we will get it out to you as soon as I get it from Pat. We'll give you hard copies so you can mark it up. And we'll give you electronic too. I don't know, some people would rather look at it electronically. We'll give it both ways.
All right,
Right.
thank you all.
Hey, thank you. Great job presenting to us tonight, Pat.
Thanks.
Okay. So we're going to take a short break here before we start the public hearing.
wasn't, yep, yep, okay. Yep, landscape lighting, building, yep, okay. Yep, okay, so probably start with,
Do you have the public notice?
If you want to open them,
I'm looking for the public notice.
just drag the whole window.
you wanna open, just,
Well, every time you open one up, you'd have to drag it over.
oh, how do I, oh, I got it, okay.
It's set up like a double monitor. It's just,
Oh, so this drag, so how do I get that up?
at the top of the screen, drag from there,
Oh, okay, gotcha.
there.
And then maximize it, yeah, okay. Okay. How do I clear that out?
Click on the gray space.
What's that? Yeah, right.
Not off easy.
You've got it highlighted, so just click where you are.
Expect to be
Okay.
rewarded somehow.
I don't know if it'll blow up.
Pizza offer better be good.
Square peg pizza.
That's good, okay.
We're waiting for one member to come.
Showing flow of traffic coming off of A.
Everything. How about a lighting thing, you know?
What?
Diagrams, I think. All right,
Just make sure I can,
so now we are going to,
where's that mouse? What's that? The mouse, is it going multiple screens?
Oh, yeah, cool, yeah.
Oh, okay. Gotcha. So I'll pop one up here. How do I get the mouse down onto here?
With great difficulty. So yours is E?
That's right. Go to the, yeah, PNC meetings, PowerPoint.
Okay. It's,
going to call to order the Town of South Windsor Planning and Zoning Commission public hearing dated February 27, 1994.
it's basically like a double
we're doing a
monitor
little bit of
in an office.
Technology here.
Thank you very much.
Now how do we get back to the site?
So this is a continuation of,
Just get a skate down there.
is a continuation of application 24-03P Burnham Realty LLC. The public hearing was opened at our last regular meeting.
There we go, okay.
And this is now a request for special exception to table 4.1.1A and a site plan approval for a 5,400 square foot building in phase 1 and 1,080 square foot addition in phase 2 for equipment sales and rental and property located at 396 Burnham Street, I zone. And as I said, this is continued from February 13. So if you would identify yourself.
Good evening, I'm Andrew Bushnell with Bushnell Associates, a professional engineer and licensed land surveyor. Here tonight representing Burnham Realty LLC, the owner of the property at 396 Burnham
You
Street.
could keep the mic as close as possible
Oh,
to
okay.
your face.
Okay. So here tonight, as you mentioned, for a special exception, site plan approval for the construction of a 5,400 square foot building on this piece of property, which is located in the industrial zone. As you mentioned, phase one would be construction of a 5,400 square foot building. Just trying to zoom in on the plan here. This mouse is tricky. So if this would be phase one, a 75 by 72 foot building, be used for storage and repair of rental equipment, rental construction equipment, small scale rental construction equipment. Burnham Realty owns the buildings, two adjacent buildings next door at 410, I believe it's 430 Burnham Street, that house the Able Tool Company. They've been in business in East Hartford for a while now, and they rent, service, and sell small scale construction equipment, compactors, rollers, skid steer loaders, small mini excavators, things of that nature. So this would be an additional building, part of their operation there on Burnham Street. And then phase two would be the smaller part of the building, in addition to the building here, 1,080 square feet, which at this point is anticipated would be some additional storage or repair area or some office space to complement the phase one building. So the parcel overall, excuse me, is 6.69 acres. The proposed development we're proposing is on the front portion of the property. The rear portion from our limit of development, which is the retention pond here, back to the north is pretty much all wetlands. There's some dry area. There's a pocket of dry area here of non-wetlands, and then there may be some pockets of island dry areas back here. The property goes back, and then it's kind of an L shape, upside down L shape here. It goes this way too behind these other properties on Burnham Street. That's pretty much all wetlands, non-buildable land back there. A portion of it is in the 100-foot upland review area. So you can see here, we received approval for this site plan from the Inland Wetlands Commission at their meeting last week. We are proposing, get back to my numbers here. So the 6.69 acres, we're proposing 6% impervious lot coverage. That would be the parking in the buildings. It's a combination of gravel and paved parking, but I just count gravel as impervious. Over time it gets packed down. It's almost like pavement as far as being able to absorb storm water. So 6.69 of impervious. Area disturbance in upland review area is about 0.58 acres. I also have a parking schedule here. We're required 5 spaces for the office use and 8 spaces for the industrial building use, 13 spaces. So we proposed 12 regular spaces and 1 handicap space in the parking area, with the handicap space being, the one closest to the building right here, and the other one spread out through the parking area. As I mentioned, the parking area, we're going to be paved entry driveway from Burnham Street up into the parking area here. This will be paved. The rest of the parking area, gravel, because of the nature of the equipment, the track equipment, and that really needs to be on the gravel. It would cause damage to a paved area. Therefore, we're proposing gravel area for the remainder of the area. The parking area is going to be surrounded by a 6-foot high chain link fence with privacy slats for shielding from the street, and also security reasons for storing the equipment out there. We have developed a lighting plan that we can look at. I do have on the thing here, if you'd like, we have a lighting plan for the area. We're proposing a dumpster area, on a concrete pad back here, which will be shielded by the exterior fence around the parking area. The building is going to be serviced by the existing utilities out in Burnham Street, which are gas, water, and sewer, and then we will go underground electrical cable, TV, telephone service from the pole out on Burnham Street. Utilities are overhead, those utilities are overhead on Burnham Street, but we will run them, propose to run them underground to the building from the telephone pole. You can see we have the roof pitches on the buildings. The roofs are going to mainly pitch to the back of the property. We're going to actually divert a lot of water that runs to Burnham Street now is going to actually now go to the back by the way we grade the parking lot and the way we've pitched the roofs of the two buildings. And then back here, we have a stormwater detention basin, which is also going to act as a water quality basin. It's about a little over 2 feet deep, and it will hold up the water quality value. We use the 1.3 inches for water quality value, which is going to be the new standard recommendation with the new state recommendations that are out in draft form now that are going to be coming into effect within the next few months, as I understand it. So we've designed that. We designed it with an under drain, so try to drain it down within 72 hours of a storm. So when another storm comes around, you don't want water sitting in there because it's just taking away your volume and your treatment volume in the pond. So we have a water quality volume storage, and then above that we have stormwater mitigation, so that we have the amount of peak flow of stormwater going to the rear of the property into the wetlands less than or equal to the existing flow now. As I mentioned, we're diverting water, so we have quite an increase to deal with there as far as stormwater. And then we're taking a load off of Burnham Street. I understand there's drainage issues on Burnham Street, although I guess they're looking to rebuild Burnham Street, maybe fix some of those, but I took this job over from Ken Poodler a few years ago, and in his notes was, try to keep the water off Burnham Street as much as possible because of the issues out there. It's a pretty flat road and a lot of ponding and things. So, so we have this rain garden out in front that will capture the roof water from this phase 2 portion that needs to come this way. There was no way to pitch the roof back towards the rear, so it'll grab that water from that roof. We have a trench drain on the driveway here that'll grab the driveway water from the high point up here coming down the driveway to just minimize, do what we can to minimize the amount of stormwater running on the Burnham Street. So there'll be quite a actually decrease in water from the site onto Burnham Street. The rain garden will have some plantings in it. We have a landscape plan we can look at. So that'll be a stormwater mitigation feature, but also a landscape feature at the same time. And then the detent basin 2 will have plantings in it. I have a planting schedule on page 2 here. Okay, doesn't want to go to page 2. But there'll be plantings in that. We worked with George Logan from Marina Environmental Services on the design of the pond and the type of plantings, and he made some recommendations here for plantings in the pond to make it a wet bottom pond to help for stormwater treatment. If there's any questions on the site plan, I can answer them now. We can move on. We can look at the landscape plan and the lighting plan and those sort of things if you'd like. Move on, okay. How do I get back to get out of this? Get out of this. How do I get? Yeah, we're gonna open like the landscape plan or the let's landscape plan, the second one down. Pretty good.
Landscape.
Yeah.
Are you gonna need the lighting plan?
Yeah. If you could, can you do them both?
Try to-
Okay. Okay. All right.
Could bring this whole thing.
Just go over his. Okay. All right.
So lighting.
Yeah.
Landscape. Zoom in there.
Okay. So this is the lighting plan that we had developed for the site. You know, shows the lumens, show that there's no light pollution, no light traveling off the site. Basically, you know, we're just trying to light the parking area in the areas adjacent to the building. Hard to zoom in on this.
Did we get a copy of that? Did I lose?
Yeah, there should be. Yeah, I should have gotten one. Yeah. It's well, yeah. It's good. It gets hard to read on those sheets there too, on 11 by 17s. Yeah, but you can see, you know, if you can see here, these are just the lumens. You know, and basically where you don't see any lumens, there's no light. So you know, you can see all the light is concentrated inside the parking area, and then just some up the driveway a little bit. We have a combination of light poles on the perimeter and then wall packs on the building to, you know, achieve these lighting levels.
How high are the light poles?
Excuse me?
How high are the light poles?
I think these were, yeah, 12 feet. So, yeah, just a standard light pole. Yep. And you can see the wall packs on the building, typical wall packs. So that would be the lighting plan. And then landscape plan. So what this shows is some landscaping you'll see from the street over here. This is the rain garden, the landscaping in there, the front of the building here, in the front of the building there, another planting down here in the front, and then some plantings which will actually be on the interior. You may see these when the gates open. There'll be a gate here in the fence, obviously. You may see these, and there's some inside, interior landscaping. As far as landscape on the site. And then, as I mentioned, there's quite a planting list of what we call planting plugs that are going to go in the stormwater detention pond that aren't shown on here but are specified on the planting schedule on the site plan as far as landscaping.
Is that the end of your presentation?
Yeah, John from Aldrich Construction is going to do.
Did you sign in?
No. Did not.
Michelle, do you have copies of all these things that he's been showing that we haven't seen?
Yes,
like
I
the
do, and I think that my plans must not have come down. I thought they were in my box, but I have a full set of plans upstairs. You should have received a set with your packet of 11 by 17s of this, right?
Not everything he's presenting is in the
Not the
package.
same? Okay.
3 pages, yeah.
I'm not sure we sent out the lighting plan, but I'm pretty sure we sent out the side plan and the landscape plan.
In a previous meeting?
Yes.
May have been the problem. We should have resent it. Okay.
Okay.
My apologies.
Okay.
All right.
Hello, my name is John Hernowitz from Aldrich Construction. General contractors actually did 2 prior buildings for Able Tool. Just going to go through a little bit of a site overview and a little additional information about the building for you. So first we'll go through some floor plans and elevations. This is the floor plan for Phase 1 and Phase 2. You can see Phase 1 is a 75-foot by 72-foot shop building, with Phase 2 being an additional office on the southeast corner of the building. Here are the elevations. Top left, you can see the south elevation, which would be facing Burnham Street. Also have west, north, and east elevations. We have gray on top, white on bottom, which I'll go through some pictures too. It matches up to the existing buildings at 430 and 410. Phase 1 and 2, this is just showing the additional office, again, on that southeast corner of the building. Now a little bit of a site overview and history of a couple of these sites. First here is all 3 parcels owned by Burnham Realty. We have 430 and 410, as well as 396, which is where this building would be located. Red line shows Burnham Street with South Windsor to the north up above, and East Hartford to the south. Here is the original building at 410. So originally this was the only building on these 3 lots, and we were contracted to build an 8,000 square foot building on 430. There was already an existing foundation. I'll show you, here's an aerial view. To the right you'll see 430 where there was already concrete foundation, which is what we built on. And then to the left was the original 410 headquarters for Able Tool. Here is a picture from the street view of what 430 was before construction, and then after construction. You can see, again, nice landscaping, fence, and gray up top, white on bottom, which was the same as we were going to have for the new building at 396. Now, right as we were nearing the end of construction in 2020 for this building, we actually had a fire in 410. I'll share a few photos of that with you. This was just, I believe, April of 2020. You can see East Hartford, South Windsor Fire were there. I believe there were multiple other departments, 40 plus firefighters. Just kind of a fluke issue with the heating system. Whole building was destroyed. These are the internals that you can see all the machinery. Unfortunately, all of it was gone. And we were contacted to rebuild on that existing foundation. And so today, this is the building at 410. And again, we have white on top this time with gray on bottom, but again, the same coloration kind of patterns to make it nice and cohesive across lots. Again, landscaping and fencing up as well to kind of hide from street view. Now I'd like a quick street walkthrough. I'm going to start on 396 and just kind of work my way down the street so you guys can see where we're going to be building. First is 396 looking to the northeast, so we're all the way on the west side of the street, going to be working east. You can see there's actually already been a lot of work done on this lot to clean it up, get grass growing here, looking straight on. And to the northwest, you can see on the right side of the photo is 410, and we'll turn. There's 410 looking at it to the northeast. Again, this building was just finished up a little over a year ago. And looking straight on from the street, as well as looking northwest up the driveway. And I'll turn to the right, and here is 430 again. So we're just working our way down the street, looking northeast, straight ahead, and then just past it to the northwest. And then the last 2 items I want to share with you are actually some videos going up Burnham Street. I'm going to start just past 430 next to 450, which is Able Tool's neighbor just to the east. So the building on the right of this video is 450. And then coming into frame, we have 430 today. Again, we trying to keep it a little cohesive across. Again, gray on top, white on bottom, same fencing, similar landscaping. Coming into frame is 410. And just past it here is 396, where the new building would be located. And I'm going to show you one other video of across the street, actually. So this is going to be looking into East Hartford. You can see the bus depot across, as well as the NEFCO, which is directly across from 396. Coming around to Burnham, you'll see 430 and 410. So as the Able Tool truck, and ending on 396 where the building would be. And that is everything I have for you.
So did you sign in?
I will right now. Thank you.
Does that conclude your presentation? Yes. All right, thank you. So next we'll ask our town planner to speak both for the planning department and the engineering department.
Yes, I'll be speaking for both. Thank you. So this is a request for a special exception and a site plan approval for a 5,400 square foot building in Phase 1, just about 1,100 square feet in Phase 2. Just to clarify the special exception request, in the Phase 2 part of the building, they would potentially be doing equipment sales, and equipment sales in our industrial zone is by a special exception approval. So that is why that request is here. They wouldn't take advantage of that in Phase 1, but in Phase 2, they want to keep that option. Another thing I'll point out is, as we saw, they have 3 facilities. Each of these facilities stands on its own from a zoning perspective. So in the future, if one wants to sell off, it wouldn't need any, subdivision or any kind of special exception approval. So by applying this way, they're preserving the ability to have sales in the future at this particular location. They did provide a narrative and indicated that currently they're Monday through Friday operations, 7 to 5 p.m. Again, if they do sell sales, it would be under those hours. So as indicated, it is a pretty large piece of property, 6.7 acres. There's really only about an acre or so buildable up towards the front. So what you see is all you're going to see from a building perspective on that property. I think it's going to be its closest point would be about 37 feet from the property line with its Phase 2 addition. This is an unusual situation where we do not own Burnham Street, East Hartford does. So the applicant will be responsible for contacting East Hartford for a curb cut into the property. We'll work with East Hartford on any other drainage issues along Burnham Street, that kind of thing. So they're aware of that and we'll be in contact with them. As indicated, the impervious coverage is only 6%. We allow up to 65%. They are proposing the water quality basin along the frontage and again along in the back. They did go through the wetlands application process and they did receive approval at their 21st meeting. They are requiring a couple bonds, a $3,000 erosion bond, $15,000 bond for the stormwater structure establishment, and a $5,000 bond for the wetlands plantings were referred to. They are providing parking for, it's 12 spaces, I have a correction there, as required for our regulations. They have shown full cutoff lighting, both pole lighting and well pack lighting with the photometric plans. This is another situation where they will be visiting both our town sanitary sewer water pollution control authority as well as MDC for approval. So they'll have a double layer approval on the sewers for that, again being that because it's in East Hartford. The fire marshal has reviewed the plans and has no concerns or comments. The applicant did go in from the design review on February 1st with the same presentation. I think the committee members were pleased to see the cohesiveness amongst the buildings, and the presentation certainly gave us a good viewing of what we're going to get done in that area. I would comment too, the black screening down there, if you didn't drive by there, it's really pretty good effective screening of all the equipment that is down there. So they will be carrying that onto this new lot to screen. They do store quite a bit of equipment on those sites down there. As required, we did notify the town of East Hartford anytime a property is either on our town line or within 500 feet, we do notify the abutting municipality. I have not been contacted with any comments or concerns. If this application is approved, the planning department has no additional modifications to request. The engineering department did have some technical questions and comments. Revised plans were received. I did have one of the project engineers reviewed them, and essentially she was satisfied with the changes that were made. We will have a recommendation that the town engineer review the final plans and incorporate any changes he requests. Other than that, that's it for the staff comments. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, now we'll take comments from members of the public in any order. Is there anyone here from the public who would like to comment on this application? Hearing and seeing none, we'll move on to commissioners. Let's start from this end this time. Mr. Cavagnaro.
Thank you. Start off with a few comments before I get into some questions. First of all, I do appreciate the display, the presentation, especially the drone footage. I think I've been in the commission for 3 years. First time I've ever seen drone footage for an application, so I do appreciate the creativity there. Outside of that, I do appreciate seeing the rain garden up front. More of the sustainability features I definitely appreciate seeing. Now into some of the questions I do have. So I read through the very brief memo that you guys did submit, and one of the items that you did talk about was, I think in the second sentence, it says, expecting in time that this may become a standalone retail facility, with the Phase 2 build-out. Now, we talked about that those are going to be offices. That's what that means, right? Standalone retail facility, AKA the offices?
You can identify yourself and sign in, please.
Yes, Derek Bauer, Able Tool and Equipment, and Burnham Realty. Yeah, by standalone, I think standalone retail building or something, the phrasing was, meaning that we'll, set it up, put employees there and set up to handle customers directly there. I mean, the Phase 1 is really just, it's storage. I mean, we've got, we're an equipment distribution company, right? And with what's been happening the last few years, it's all about scale and stock and buying truckload quantities and things. So for us to compete, we just keep having to bring in more inventory. So, that's the Phase 1 portion. And as we grow, we've been growing at a pretty steady pace the last few years. It's really tough to foresee exactly what we would do there. I mean, some thoughts are it could serve us as like maybe a small tool repair. I'm right across from Nefco, right? So I've watched what they've done. It's really, it's funny. I probably should have caught on years ago when they started it, but they put up a big building, and then another big building, and then they got another building down that just does rentals and some repairs. So it's kind of in keeping with that vein.
Okay. Within that question or answer, I guess, you did mention employees, which is a good transition to my next question. I'm not sure if it says it somewhere, but with Phase 1, how many employees are you expecting on having? Then once you build out to Phase 2, how many more employees are you expecting to have?
Phase 1 wouldn't be anybody. Just be,
Just like a warehouse manager?
Yeah, I mean, somebody to, occasionally load or unload trucks. Right now, what we've been doing to, handle inventories, we're renting from a neighbor. We've been renting from a neighbor space. I don't know what the address is, right to the east. And then we also will divert inventory into our location up in Massachusetts. So the idea is we'll have instead of sending it to Massachusetts and determining what goes where, we can bring it into 396. Meet trucks, schedule trucks accordingly, and determine what is going to get delivered to what building.
Okay. And you also said how many more you're adding with Phase 2?
How many would I add in Phase 2?
How many more employees you'd be?
I would think you'd need at least 3 people over there if we were going to start serving customers directly from that location.
Okay. And I guess also on the topic of input and output, I guess in terms of car traffic, there's 11 parking spaces. So, how many cars are you expecting to come? Again, the schedule is 7 a.m. to 5 p.m. Monday through Friday. So how many cars are you expecting to come throughout the day?
It's hard to say. With Phase 1, virtually none, really. Other than, we'll take a load in probably a few times a week, longer term, I would say it's really difficult to say. We don't get a lot of, I guess we're retail, but we're not real busy retail. A lot of our product is a delivered product. We get a little bit, we're construction related, so we'll get typically there's a little bit of a morning surge and an afternoon surge. But, people want to come in, pick up, leave, get out, and get on their way.
Okay. And that does also include truck traffic, for example? It is a warehouse after all, and you are going to be storing concrete equipment. So I'm just curious how frequent those shipments would be.
I would think, what we're going to ship into that building. It's the smallest of all our facilities, so the potential is it could fill pretty quickly. And what we've done, whether we're at what I call our rental property where we're storing equipment, is we try to put things that we don't expect to turn very quickly, so it tends to be more longer term storage. You know, I would think, a truck or two a week, something like that.
Okay. I'm also seeing on here, I'm not sure if this is a loading dock, but I only see one on here. I mean, I'm just curious on the topic of that. Do you expect any truck idling at all, or no? Because we've ran into that problem before.
Yeah, I can imagine, yeah. Not really. No, I mean, these truck drivers come in, they want to get out. They don't want, we're getting deliveries from, be it FedEx or Conway or those types of trucks. These guys, I don't know how they're paid, but they're very, they're on my guy, get me unloaded, get me out, get me moving. I mean, we don't have a lot of truck idling time, whether it's internal trucks or these deliveries.
Okay. Very last question before I let you go. Probably the easiest one. So again, the 7 a.m. to 5 p.m. timeline, Monday through Friday. I saw there were 3 light poles being built around the little parking lot there. Is there a timetable or time schedule for those being operated? Like when they'll be on?
I've never really thought of that. If we would put them on timers. I mean, I think right now what we're doing in the buildings, I think they come on and they stay on for security reasons all night, right? Because we've got a lot of equipment in the yard.
Yeah.
Over there, right now, I don't think we have any light poles at any of the properties. So that, honestly, it's a new one to me. I don't know if we would, I would imagine we would probably stay consistent with what we're doing in the buildings and have the building lights come on as, dawn to dusk. I don't know, the light poles, if we put them on the same timer, I don't know, is there an issue with the light poles? They become a nuisance, or is there a concern with the light poles being on overnight?
No, it wasn't really a concern. I just know that there's a couple houses on the western side. I know that hasn't been a problem for 410, 430, because there is that buffer that exists right now.
Yeah, I understand, yeah.
Yeah, but I'm just curious, that's all.
Yeah, I mean, I think we could approach it with, I understand, I mean, we've got, we've moved right in on that one house there, so. I mean, listen, we want to be a good neighbor, right? We would approach it with a high level of flexibility is what I would tell you.
All right, well, that's all I got. Thank you so much.
Sure, you're welcome.
Thank you, guys. What is the intended timing between completion of Phase 1 and then going to Phase 2?
I mean, I'm thinking, years, really. I mean, a lot of that is, economically driven, right? I mean, like I said, our business has grown, pretty rapidly, pretty steadily. I don't know, I mean, in my projection for this year, this may be the first year where I really projected no growth. That's going to play a huge factor, We're infrastructure related, so I'm hoping the effects of this infrastructure bill, my business has really been waiting on the come, and it just hasn't really been coming. And we've made some investments in inventory and some infrastructure things that haven't really proven out yet. If I was to give you my best guess, I would think we're, 2 to 3 years. I mean, this is going to be, Aldrich can, these buildings take a long time to build, right? So I don't know that, this is a building that, I don't expect to be built, this year, right, or be completed. So, I mean, probably 3 or 4 years.
Okay, yeah,
Phase 2.
I was curious if you were planning to just finish Phase 1 and then immediately go into Phase 2, and obviously you're not. So.
Right now, my honest thoughts are to kind of probably take a pause and determine, how best to address and make use of the building. I mean, I would say, there's a very good potential that we may build a fab. I mean, this growth that we're on, it seems like, whenever we get a little more space, you fill it up, right? And the customers come, and it just keeps growing. But I think, honestly, I would think 3 or 4 years is a good best guess.
And then the paved and parking area that's going to be set up, that's not going to increase when Phase 2 comes in. The area that you're going to be paved is enough to
contained.
accommodate
Yeah,
both?
that's right, yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Michelle, the 11 parking spaces, that's assuming the retail piece too?
Yeah, that was a full-built outpost, yes.
Okay. Does that need a handicap access one?
There is a handicap spot.
Oh, there
shown.
is, okay,
Yes. Yep.
okay. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
I have no comment.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I didn't get your name?
Oh, Derek Bauer.
Derek?
Yes, yes.
Hi, Derek. We've been talking about the acoustics in here really bad. Can you tell me again what the business is, what it does?
Sure. Able Tool and Equipment, we are an equipment distributor, meaning that we are, a dealer for, a number of construction equipment lines. A lot of them are lesser-known names, small equipment. I mean, everything we do is probably below, I would say, 10-ton machines and down. So what we'll do is we sell and service and rent things like paving rollers, plate compactors, concrete equipment, air tools, compressors, things of that nature.
So I'm trying to understand like the activity. So customers come in, they buy things, they leave?
That's right.
Or it also sounds like customers come in, they drop things off for servicing?
Yes,
So all the above?
that's right.
And your hours are Monday through Friday to 5?
That's right.
So question for you or Michelle, how close to residences? Do we have a sense on that?
Well, you're in an industrial zone down there, right? There
Yeah.
are some residences that are currently in the industrial zone to the west of this property, right?
That's right.
That are kind of converting into industrial uses themselves. So you're really in a real mixed area. There
Right.
is some residents on the East Hartford side, but as you saw from the drone right across from them, it's clearly commercial. So
So,
the single family that's there on the South Windsor side is non-conforming for the most part because it's an industrial zone.
so I bring it up because of concerns about disturbing neighbors, nearby neighbors. From the way you described the business model, it doesn't sound like that's likely to happen, and the fact that there's no one from the public here to complain that you're going to do this, I have to assume that that is not something that's top of mind with your neighbors. Fencing, what are you going to do about fencing?
We're going to stay consistent with what you've seen on the other two properties. I think that's, I think it's 6 foot high, the chain link. We're doing black vinyl with the black privacy slats. We're going to just stay, I mean, the goal is to, we'll be using the same vendors and the same style and the same setup with the other two buildings, landscaping, fencing.
Okay, and it sounds like we covered the parking questions, so that's all I have. Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome.
No comments.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I have no additional.
Yeah, my only question would be, will this Phase 2, will this ever turn into an auction site like United Rentals does, where it turns into just chaos with hundreds of people showing up to buy used rental equipment?
No, ours is very much we're an equipment dealer, but we're very much what I call I call people we're a boutique equipment dealer because we deal with very specific brands. We deal with very specific parts of the industry, being primarily infrastructure, civil, utility contractors, things like that, where our pitch is we're not the United Rentals, we're not the big box. We have a very tight market that we're after. I don't. That's not.
Okay, that would be my only concern. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
I have no additional questions. Anything else from members of the commission? Michelle?
No, I'm great.
Any reason to not to close the hearing? Okay, we're closing the public hearing at 9:16.
All right, thank you.
So we will address this later, in a few minutes of our deliberation. Okay, so now we're back in the regular meeting. The next item on the agenda is public participation. Is there anybody who'd like to comment on any item which is not on the agenda? Hearing and seeing none, we move on. Any bonds?
No bonds. You did enough 2 weeks ago.
That was a high productivity.
I think you skipped over new business, though.
Sorry?
I have new business
Okay.
before bonds, and it was the same application on my agenda.
Were you going to decide on this application tonight? It's on your agenda for decision if you want to do that.
Right.
Okay.
Okay, yeah.
Okay.
So now we'll go to, I'm sorry, I got it out of order. The discussion, decision, and action regarding application 24-03P. Do we have any discussion or comments on that? Would someone like to make a motion?
Is that the document?
I believe so.
I make a motion that we approve application 24-03P, Burnham Realty LLC, with the following exceptions. Prior to commencement of any site work, a meeting must be held with town staff. No building permit will be issued until the final Mylars have been filed in the town clerk's office. The application is subject to the conditions of approval of the Inland Wetlands Agency, Conservation Commission, including bonds in the amount of $3,000 for the establishment and maintenance of erosion and sedimentation controls, $15,000 for the establishment of the stormwater structure, and $5,000 for establishment of wetlands plantings. All bonds must be in one of the forms described in the enclosed bond policy. 4, an as-built plan as is required prior to issuance of a certificate of occupancy per section 9.1.3 of the zoning regulations. 5, all plans used in the field by the developer must bear the stamp and authorized signature of the town of South Windsor. 6, the building street number must be included on the final plan. 7, pavement markings must be maintained in good condition throughout the site, drives and parking areas. 8, all freestanding signs and/or building signs require the issuance of a sign permit before they are erected. 9, the sanitary sewers will be subject to both MDC and South Windsor's WPCA approval. And 10, engineering comments dated 2/1/24 must be incorporated into the final plans.
Second.
Any discussion? In which case we'll call the question. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstaining? Passes unanimously.
Just 2 things I just want to bring to your attention. You should have all received in your packets. This is the annual meeting that I know some of you like to go to. If folks are interested in going, if you can let Josh know, let's say by March 15th or something, we can make sure that we sign everybody up for that. I also just want to let you know that I will be forwarding you, there's several training seminars that are coming up that are being sponsored through different organizations. I'm going to send them your way. If anything interests you and you want us to sign you up for it, we'll sign you up for it. But they're really trying to beef up the type of training available to planning and zoning members. So I'll send it your way. And then just lastly, I just want to publicly acknowledge the Planning Department's bittersweet loss of Jeff Folger, our Conservation and Wetlands Officer. His last day will be Friday. Jeff and I have had the pleasure of working together close to 29 years. So he will definitely be missed by the townspeople and certainly by the town staff. He's kind of our go-to man, and if you ever need a deadpan joke, he's always good for one. So he comes in quite often. So anyhow, I just wanted to publicly thank him for all his years of service, and the town has been lucky for the many years he's given to him. So that's all I got.
Do we keep a tally of the training hours that
Yeah, if anybody, we do have, like, we're into a new year now, so you have to start fresh. Anybody does any training, let us know. We do keep a spreadsheet for it. I also have contacted our town attorney about doing some just general planning and zoning training. Now that we're up to 10 members again, I will probably look to do that sometime April, May. He'll come and just do an overview of planning, zoning rules and responsibilities, which will give you a couple hours, so.
So if there are members who are falling short of, it's a 4-hour per year requirement.
Yeah, 4 hours, you have to have 1 hour of in affordable housing, so you do have to tailor it a little bit, but like I said, I'll start sending it your way, and we'll try to make sure everybody completes it this year.
Thank you.
Michelle, after we adjourn, I have a question for you.
Any other business?
I'd like to make a
Motion to
motion, we adjourn.
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye. Is Scott Roberts the IT guru? I would like to pursue trying to find some way to get closed captioning in this room. Would he be the guy I talk to? All right.